12 August 1942, 04:10 hours. Tenaru River, Guadalcanal. A pale, mist-soaked dawn crawled over the coconut palms as the first shapes appeared through the haze. Japanese boots, silent, disciplined, pressed into the wet sand. Steam drifted from their uniforms, where the jungle humidity clung like a second skin. Somewhere in the distance, a lone bird called once, and then even nature seemed to hold its breath. Lieutenant Takahiro Matsuda raised his binoculars, the lenses fogging at the edges. Ahead of him, across the shallow river, were American foxholes. Dark, jagged cuts in the earth. But something was wrong. There were voices. Calm ones. Not the desperate rasp of starving men. Not the broken muttering of soldiers on their last rations. Matsuda lowered the binoculars. He listened again. Clattering mess tins. Low conversation. Even a short laugh. Laughing Americans. Here, on an island where Japanese troops had already spent weeks rationing the last grains of rice, he turned to his sergeant, Inoue, who was crouched beside the reeds, sweat beading on his forehead. They sound, well, Matsuda murmured. Inoue nodded, jaw tight. It shouldn't be possible. Because every briefing since Tokyo had insisted on the same thing. Americans are soft. Americans break quickly. Americans cannot fight without comfort, supply, or luxury. That belief had been repeated so often, it had hardened into doctrine. It shaped how officers thought, how soldiers marched, how Japanese strategy formed. Yet as the mist thinned, the Americans on Guadalcanal moved along their perimeter with an ease that scraped against everything Matsuda expected to see. One Marine trudged past with a crate on his shoulder. Another squatted by a foxhole, casually eating from a can, actual meat from the smell of it, before offering a spoonful to the Marine beside him. The aroma drifted across the river. Rich, warm, impossible. Inoue frowned. They eat like it's mainland Japan. Matsuda stiffened. No, they ate better than mainland Japan. A brief burst of engine noise rattled the jungle canopy. Matsuda flinched, instinctively ducking lower. The sound came from the direction of Lunga Point, a steady hum of American transports and landing craft, still unloading supplies day and night. It had been going on for days. The Japanese command insisted it would end. Insisted the U.S. fleet was weak. Insisted Marines were already starving. But Matsuda could see otherwise now. Americans moved with energy. Their uniforms hung properly. Their helmets sat square on their heads, not loose on thin skulls. Their gestures were confident, not brittle. And then, one of those micro moments that sears itself into a man's memory. An American stepped out of a dugout holding a mug. He blew on it once and took a long sip. Hot coffee. Real coffee. On a front line. Inoue's whisper cracked. They have fresh supply. Every day. Matsuda swallowed, throat tightening. Truth surfaced in a cold flash. We misjudged them. A mortar thumped in the distance, sending vibrations through the sandy ground. Japanese troops crouched lower, fingers brushing the worn grips of their Arisaka rifles. The men were lean, some already gaunt, after days of marching on limited calories. Their stomachs growled audibly in the morning silence. On the opposite bank, an American Marine tossed an empty can aside. wiped his mouth, and stretched with the loose comfort of a man who slept with a full belly. The contrast hit like a physical blow. This was supposed to be easy. This island was supposed to starve the Americans before they starved the Japanese. But supply lines tell the real story of a war, and Matsuda was beginning to understand just how wrong the assumptions had been. A rustle of movement came from behind him, more men of the Ichiki detachment crawling forward to join the observation line. One whispered that their commander, Colonel Ichiki himself, believed the Marines could be overrun in one decisive night attack. Matsuda kept his eyes on the Americans. "I don't think they're starving," he said quietly. Another Marine walked past, carrying a box labeled U.S. Rations, 1942. The man tore it open like a kid unwrapping sweets, laughing with someone out of sight. Inoue exhaled, a thin, defeated breath. "They look ready." A mini-reveal appeared in the smallest details. Not the Americans themselves, but the ground around them. Stacked crates, organized trenches, fresh sandbags, shells aligned neatly beside machine gun posts. These were not men waiting to break. These were men preparing to stand. Matsuda pressed his lips into a hard line. The whine of mosquitoes filled the air, punctuated by occasional bursts of marine chatter. His own stomach twisted painfully. The rice ration last night had been half a cup, barely enough to sustain the march, let alone a fight. A Marine lifted a steel pot from a field stove. The smell, savory, meaty, drifted across the shallow river again. One of the Japanese privates licked his cracked lips. Another whispered, "I can smell beef." Beef on Guadalcanal, while Japanese troops boiled weeds and palm shoots to stretch their portions. Matsuda's fingers trembled slightly as he lowered his binoculars. He steadied them by gripping the fabric of his uniform. Something fundamental was shifting in his mind. War is not won by spirit alone. War is not won by belief. War is won by endurance, and endurance is fed. The realization landed hard. The Americans were not starving. The Americans were thriving. He looked at Inoue. Inoue looked back. Both men understood the same truth now. Their coming attack, the one every Japanese soldier expected would sweep the Marines into the sea, was not going to hit starving, broken defenders. It was going to hit well-fed, well-supplied, awake, alert, and determined Americans. And that changed everything. Behind them, Runner approached through the brush. "Lieutenant," he whispered sharply. "Orders from Colonel Ichiki. Prepare the men. We attack soon." Matsuda hesitated only a moment, but that moment carried the full weight of the scene before him. He turned back toward the river one last time. Across the water, a Marine raised his mug again, taking another slow, unhurried sip. Matsuda looked at the runner. His voice was a flat, quiet warning. "Tell the colonel, the Americans are not what we were told." The runner blinked, confused. "Sir?" Matsuda didn't repeat himself. He simply rose, dusted the damp sand from his knees, and stepped back into the dense Guadalcanal jungle, toward an attack he already sensed would end in disaster. And the worst part? No one in command would believe him. Not until it was far too late. Twilight bled into the canopy, draining color from the Guadalcanal jungle until only shifting silhouettes remained. The air grew heavy, a suffocating blanket of humidity that clung to every surface. Crickets buzzed in an uneven rhythm, and somewhere deeper in the brush, a wild pig squealed before going silent. Lieutenant Matsuda crouched beside the rest of the Ichiki detachment as the final light slipped away. Boots shifted on damp soil. Rifles clicked softly as men checked bolts in the dark. Someone coughed. Too dry. Too long. Lungs weakened from days of half rations. Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki stood at the center of a small clearing, illuminated by faint strips of moonlight. His silhouette was rigid, shoulders back, chin raised, sword sheathed at his side. He radiated certainty, the kind that allowed no room for doubt. He addressed his officers in a curt whisper. "Tonight, we crush them. Tomorrow, we raise the flag over Henderson Field." A few men straightened, encouraged by his certainty, but Matsuda felt his stomach tighten. He could still smell that American coffee, still see Marines casually eating meat only hours earlier, still hear their calm, unfatigued voices drifting across the Tenaru. Colonel Ichiki's assumptions had not shifted. His confidence was absolute, rooted in pre-war ideology, in years of doctrine that insisted Americans lacked resolve. Matsuda had once believed all of that too. But now, he could not shake the image of the Marine with the steaming mug and full pockets of rations. Beside Matsuda, Sergeant Inoue wiped a thin sheen of sweat from his forehead. His voice was barely a breath. "Sir, the men are hungry and tired." Matsuda nodded. "I know." Inoue hesitated, glancing toward the colonel. "Do you think he understands what we saw?" Matsuda exhaled slowly. "He believes he already knows the Americans. That is the problem." A young private named Sato knelt close enough for Matsuda to hear his shivering breath. He was clutching his Arisaka rifle, as though squeezing it could squeeze courage into his bloodstream. "Lieutenant," Sato whispered, "do we really attack tonight? Without artillery? Without rest?" Matsuda turned to him, placing a hand on the young soldier's shoulder. The boy stiffened at the unexpected contact. "Yes," he answered softly. "We follow orders." Sato nodded, but his Adam's apple bobbed in a hard swallow. A few steps away, another soldier rummaged through his ration pouch. The canvas rustled as he found a single rice ball, small enough to fit between two fingers. He took one bite, winced at its sourness, then forced himself to chew. "Should have saved it," he muttered. Matsuda pretended not to hear the desperation in his voice. The jungle around them vibrated with the muffled noises of preparation, bayonets being affixed with metallic clicks, officers whispering through the ranks, the faint thump of men shifting their packs. Someone whispered a joke about American weaknesses, but it fell flat under the weight of reality. The truth was in their bodies, tired, thinned out, underfed, overconfident only by command, never by experience. A sudden, distant crack of a rifle snapped the tension. Several Japanese soldiers froze, heads snapping upward. Matsuda raised a hand. "Not at us. A Marine firing at shadows." But even he wasn't sure. A runner burst into their clearing, panting quietly. "Colonel Ichiki, the forward scouts are set. The river crossing point is ready." Colonel Ichiki's voice was sharp. "Good. We strike the moment the moon rises above the tree line. Momentum is victory." The men prepared to stand, but Matsuda held his ground. He couldn't stay quiet any longer. He stepped closer to Ichiki and bowed gently. "Colonel, permission to speak." Ichiki turned, his expression barely visible under the patchy moonlight. "Granted." Matsuda took a breath. "Sir, I observed the American lines today. They are not malnourished. They are well supplied. Constantly. They appear fresh." Ichiki's jaw hardened. "The Americans are soft, Lieutenant. Well-fed or not, they lack will." Respect required silence, but Matsuda pushed further. "Sir, their trenches were newly reinforced. Their machine gun crews looked alert. Their morale..." Ichiki cut him off with a whisper laced in steel. "Henderson Field must fall. A night assault will succeed where the enemy believes we are incapable." Matsuda swallowed the protest rising in his throat. The colonel was not wrong about the stakes. He was simply wrong about the enemy. Ichiki stepped forward, raising his voice just enough for the nearest platoons to hear. "Remember your training. Remember your nation. Remember the Emperor counts on your resolve." A few men straightened with renewed purpose. Others looked down at their boots. Matsuda saw no hesitation in Ichiki's eyes. Only belief. Dangerous belief. He returned to his squad, where Inoue was already distributing final instructions. Matsuda knelt beside him. "What did he say?" Inoue asked. Matsuda sighed. "That his judgment is unchanged." Inoue's mouth tightened. "Then we must fight as best we can." In the darkness, a faint glow caught Matsuda's eye, a distant flicker from the American lines across the river. He raised his binoculars. He saw Marines cleaning their rifles under small covered lamps. Others sat eating from open cans, steam rising in the night air. A machine gun crew was already in position, the gun pointing directly at the expected crossing. He lowered the binoculars slowly. "They're waiting for us," he breathed. Inoue's eyes flicked sideways. "Then we must move first." But Matsuda shook his head. "No, they're not waiting. They're expecting." A subtle difference, but a deadly one. The moon crested the tree line a few minutes later, spilling pale light across the riverbed and shimmering off the water. Colonel Ichiki lifted his hand, rifles leveled, boots readied, breaths held. Then, the single word that would decide the fate of hundreds of Japanese soldiers: advance. The first line stepped into the shallows. Cold water swirled around their ankles. Matsuda followed, heart hammering against his ribs. And just as the second line entered the stream, just as the moon lit their helmets in a silver sheen, a single American flare burst open overhead, turning night into day. Every Japanese soldier froze, and from across the river, through a wall of blinding white light, Matsuda saw silhouettes shift. Not scrambling, not surprised. Ready. Machine gun barrels tilted downward. Mortar tubes angled skyward. Riflemen steadied their sights. The Americans were not caught off guard. They had been prepared the entire time. And Matsuda felt the cold dread of a realization that spread faster than any flare's light. This wasn't an ambush. This was a trap they had walked into willingly. The flare's white glare washed over the river like a harsh sunrise, outlining every helmet, every rifle, every trembling hand. For a heartbeat, everything hung suspended. Japanese soldiers frozen mid-stride, water swirling around their calves, breath locked in their chests. Then, the Americans opened fire. A burst of .30 caliber machine gun fire ripped through the night, the tracers slicing red across the river like molten threads. The first row of Japanese troops dropped instantly, some falling backward into the water, others collapsing forward with a splash. Shouts erupted across the line. sharp and panicked. Matsuda ducked instinctively, the muzzle flashes reflecting off his helmet. Water sprayed as rounds tore into the river around him, each impact a violent, hollow slap. "Down! Stay low!" he hissed, grabbing Inoue by the collar and dragging him behind a clump of reeds. But there was little cover, only shallow water, exposed sandbanks, and the brutal light of the flare overhead. Mortar rounds began landing seconds later. Thump, whistle, impact. Columns of spray erupted, raining cold water and debris across the crossing point. The explosions drowned out the cries of the wounded. Sato, the young private who'd clung to his rifle like a lifeline, scrambled toward Matsuda, eyes wide, face pale. "Lieutenant, where do we go? There is no cover." Matsuda grabbed him, forcing the boy's head down as another burst of fire swept inches above them. "Forward or back, Sato. Choose fast." But the truth was neither option offered safety. The riverbank behind them was jammed with more soldiers pushing forward on Ichiki's orders. The Americans had the high ground, the visibility, the supply lines, and the discipline to fire in controlled, devastating bursts. Another flare shot up, turning the sky into a cold imitation of daylight. Matsuda saw the extent of the kill zone now. The Marines' positions were staggered, overlapping arcs of fire that crisscrossed the river like invisible blades. Machine guns were emplaced on high berms. Riflemen lined the trenches in perfect spacing. These were not men scrambling out of sleep. They were set, waiting, calm. One Marine leaned forward to adjust his bipod, as casually as if tightening a bolt on a workshop bench. Another shouted a short command, and two more shifted positions, flawless coordination under fire. Matsuda felt the dread settle deeper. "This is impossible," Inoue muttered. His voice was thin, strangled. The river began to fill with bodies and discarded rifles. Japanese soldiers tried to push ahead, but the slope offered no foothold. Every attempt to stand made them easy targets. Colonel Ichiki's voice barked from somewhere behind them. "Press the attack! Press the attack!" But his voice was lost under the thunder of American guns. Sato tapped Matsuda's arm. "Lieutenant, we can't reach the shore. Their fire, it's everywhere." Matsuda turned his head just in time to see another mortar round arc overhead, disappearing behind the American lines. The Marines repositioned instantly, adjusting for range. Their discipline was frighteningly precise. Then came the sound that chilled Matsuda more than the gunfire. The metallic clack-clack of Browning M1917 water-cooled machine guns being fed new belts. Not slowing, not struggling, just continuing. Inoue wiped a streak of mud from his cheek. "Sir, if we stay in the water, we die," Matsuda finished. A desperate thought flickered through his mind. Had Ichiki ever seen what Matsuda saw earlier today? Did he even consider the possibility that the reports were wrong? That the enemy was not starving, not exhausted, not desperate? Matsuda ducked as bullets tore through the reeds, sending shards of wet stalks flying. The Marines changed their firing pattern. Short, methodical bursts, aimed deliberately at anyone trying to move. They weren't wasting ammunition. They weren't panicking. They were conserving energy, maintaining fire discipline, and waiting for the assault to weaken. This wasn't the fight the Ichiki detachment had trained for. This wasn't the enemy they had expected. A Japanese corporal staggered toward them, clutching a blood-soaked sleeve. "Lieutenant! The center line collapsed. We're trapped in the channel." Matsuda gritted his teeth. "Signal a fallback." "But Colonel Ichiki," the corporal protested. Matsuda snapped, the gunfire shaking his voice. "If we stay, we all die! Fall back!" The corporal hesitated, torn between obedience and survival. Another mortar impact made the decision for him. He turned and crawled back through the reeds, shouting the order. But the chaos made it impossible to spread the message. Some men retreated instinctively. Others surged forward, thinking the order was to advance. Still others simply froze. Then Matsuda saw it. A second American flare, arcing high, illuminating not just the river, but the jungle behind the Japanese lines. And he realized something terrible. The Marines were not firing at random. They were shaping the battlefield. They were driving the Japanese into a narrower choke point, funneling them into a tighter kill zone where the machine guns could work with even greater efficiency. Inoue cursed under his breath. They're hurting us!" Another burst of fire answered him. A spray of water slapped across their faces as bullets smashed into the river inches from Sato's head. The young private gasped, trembling violently. Matsuda grabbed him by the collar. "Sato, look at me!" The boy's eyes darted wildly. "You move when I move. Stay low. Crawl. Understand?" Sato nodded, though his breathing was erratic. Matsuda risked a glance toward the American lines. Tall silhouettes, steady postures, no movement wasted, no fear visible. Not starving, not broken, not weak. They looked like men who knew they would win. And that realization struck harder than any bullet. Matsuda pressed his palm to the mud, steadying his voice. "We pull back. Now." Inoue nodded. "Yes, sir." They began to crawl, water splashing quietly as they inched backward toward the tree line. Every movement felt like an invitation for death. Tracer rounds stitched the surface nearby, and each one was a reminder of how exposed they were. The Japanese line, what remained of it, buckled completely. Some soldiers dropped their rifles and swam toward the shore. Others clawed at the mud, desperate to escape. A few continued to charge, shouting battle cries drowned out by the chattering machine guns. But none of it mattered. The Americans held the advantage on every level: visibility, positioning, coordination, rations, energy. And Matsuda knew. This was not a fight about courage. This was a fight about endurance. And endurance is fed. A final mortar round exploded behind them, scattering the retreating Japanese and forcing Matsuda flat against the riverbed. Mud smothered his cheek. His ears rang. But then, he heard it. American voices. Closer. Marines advancing. The line was collapsing fast. Matsuda forced himself upright, coughing through the haze. "Inoue! Sato! Move!" But the jungle behind them was no longer a refuge. It was becoming a trap, and the Americans were closing in. The jungle swallowed Matsuda's squad in darkness as they staggered off the riverbank, mud-soaked, deafened, and disoriented. The gunfire behind them had become a constant metallic growl, rumbling through the trees like distant thunder. Tracers streaked above the canopy in faint red arcs, each one a reminder that the Marines were pushing forward, tightening the noose. Inoue stumbled beside Matsuda, panting hard. His uniform was torn across the shoulder where a bullet had grazed him. Sato followed a step behind, shaking so violently His rifle rattled against his chest. "Lieutenant," Inoue gasped. "We've lost contact with 3rd Platoon." "We've lost contact with everyone," Matsuda replied, forcing calm into his voice. "Keep moving." But the truth was worse than that. There was no formation anymore, no coordination, no momentum. The Ichiki detachment, once praised as elite, had dissolved into scattered pockets of men crawling through a nightmare of roots, vines, and overlapping gunfire. A mortar detonated somewhere to their right, shaking dead leaves from the branches. The shockwave rippled through Matsuda's ribs, but he kept crawling, dragging Sato and the boy froze again. They needed distance. They needed darkness. They needed time. But the Americans were denying them all three. Through the jungle came the unmistakable sounds of disciplined pursuit, short bursts of rifle fire, clipped radio chatter, boots advancing in controlled bounds. The Marines weren't chasing recklessly. They weren't rushing. They were pressing forward methodically, like hunters closing on wounded prey. Matsuda swallowed hard. So this is what they are really like. Not soft, not fragile, not dependent on comfort. Just steady, prepared, fed, fearless. He remembered the smell of beef drifting across the river that morning. Now he could smell something else. Burning powder, split earth, sweat churned by adrenaline and terror. It mixed with the sweet rot of jungle foliage. A low groan made Matsuda halt. Beneath a toppled palm, a Japanese corporal lay slumped, blood pooling beneath him. His lips moved faintly. "Water, please." Matsuda knelt, tilting his own canteen toward the man. But only a few drops trickled out, the last of his ration. The corporal swallowed weakly before whispering, "Where is the colonel?" Matsuda hesitated. The truth was brutal. Colonel Ichiki had launched the second wave personally. He had not returned from the river. "We'll find him," Matsuda said gently. The corporal nodded once, eyes unfocused, before going still. Sato looked away, jaw trembling. Matsuda gripped the boy's shoulder. "Keep your eyes forward. That's an order." But Sato whispered, "Sir, if they are chasing us, that means they still have ammunition." And there it was, the cruel arithmetic of combat. Japanese men depleted and hungry. American men supplied and resolute. Reality had exposed the myth of American weakness as a hallucination built on ideology, pride, and ignorance. A rustle from the tree line snapped Matsuda's attention upward. Inoue lifted his rifle. "Movement! 2 o'clock!" Matsuda held up a hand. "Wait!" Shadows shifted. Branches parted. A Marine patrol advanced through the underbrush, helmets low, rifles shouldered, steps steady. Their uniforms were soaked with sweat, but their posture was upright, not hunched. Their breathing was controlled. A sergeant in the lead raised his hand, signaling the patrol to stop. He scanned the jungle ahead with a calm that felt unreal in the chaos. Matsuda held his breath, lowering himself into the ferns. Sato's teeth chattered softly. Matsuda squeezed his arm, warning him. A Marine muttered, "Tracks here. Fresh." Another replied, "They're close. Keep eyes up." They moved with deliberate caution, clearing each patch of jungle with practiced motions. No shouting, no panic, no wasted movement. This was the first time Matsuda had seen Marines up close. They were younger than he expected, strong, focused, not dazed island defenders, not panicked survivors. Professionals. The sergeant raised 2 fingers. Silent signal to advance in a spread formation. In seconds, the patrol vanished to the left and right, melting into the brush. Matsuda exhaled shakily once they were gone. Inoue swallowed. We can't outrun them. No, Matsuda agreed. But we can avoid them. He gestured deeper into the jungle, leading Sato and Inoue away from the sound of boots and broken branches. As they crawled under a fallen tree trunk, Matsuda felt something give way inside him. A quiet breaking. Not fear. He had known fear before. Not shame. He had known that too. It was certainty that broke. Every scrap of propaganda he'd once absorbed, every briefing, every statement about American softness, crumbled against the hard evidence before him. He whispered more to himself than the others. They never broke. We were the ones breaking. A distant shout echoed through the jungle. The Americans had found another pocket of survivors. Gunfire erupted again. Short, efficient, lethal. Sato flinched. Sir, what do we do? Matsuda weighed the options. Fight senselessly? Die pointlessly? Or pull back, regroup, survive long enough to warn whoever still lived? He finally answered, voice firm. We move south. Link with whoever remains. This isn't over yet. But deep down, he knew the truth. The Battle of the Tenaru was already lost, not because of courage, not because of tactics, not because of terrain, but because one side had food. Reliable food. And food is not luxury in war. It is endurance. It is strength. It is the difference between a trembling trigger finger and the steady one. The myth of American weakness had died the moment the first Marine sipped his morning coffee. Matsuda had seen well-fed men. He had seen ready men. He had seen men who did not fear him. And now the jungle was filled with footsteps, American footsteps, closing in from all sides. Inoue looked at Matsuda. Sir, if we're surrounded, we won't wait, Matsuda said quietly. The 3 men pressed deeper into the undergrowth, branches scraping their helmets. Behind them, the final sounds of the Ichiki detachment faded into the night. Sporadic gunshots, shouted commands, then silence. A heavy, total silence. Matsuda paused, listening. The dread settled into final certainty. That was the last of them, he whispered. Sato's voice was barely audible. Lieutenant, are we the only ones left? Matsuda didn't answer. He simply gestured forward. They moved until the river and the gunfire were distant memories, swallowed by the jungle. Only then did Matsuda finally stop, leaning against a fallen tree, chest heaving. His throat tightened with something unexpected. Not fear, not grief, humility. He looked back through the trees in the direction of the American line, and in that quiet moment, surrounded by darkness and the smell of wet leaves, he spoke the words that defined the entire battle. We underestimated them, he murmured, and they were ready for us. A truth paid for with hundreds of lives. The myth had died. The men had died. The world had shifted. Matsuda closed his eyes, feeling the weight of it. The Americans weren't soft. They were fed. They were focused. They were fighters. And the war would never look the same again.